Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Skillshare. A few months ago, I talked about what I'd really like to see in the next Avengers movie. And while the focus and hype will, of course, mostly swirl around that film, this week I wanted to try something a little different and look even farther ahead. Specifically to the MCU's Phase 4. It's still pretty shrouded in secrecy, but one thing we do know is that it's going to have to shake things up in a big way. Now, I'm not going to claim to know what's going to happen in Avengers 4. I'm not really even a seeking out spoilers kind of guy, but it seems fairly clear, to me at least, that this is going to be the last hurrah for most, if not all, of the Phase 1 heroes. And the question of where Marvel goes from here is actually a pretty interesting one. No movie studio has ever really been in this position because no studio has ever really made it this far into a cinematic universe before. At least not this interconnected and on this scale. So in this video, I'm going to try to run down a few things that I'd like to see going forward, and take a stab at how I think the MCU can still maintain its momentum even after losing some of its biggest stars.
Look, it's going to hit. Very perceptive, Bucky.
Even without knowing a lot of the specifics of Marvel Phase 4, there's two things that I think absolutely need to be prioritized. Making sure each solo film has as much personality as possible and a unique tone, and that the next set of Avengers, whoever ends up being in it, I'm assuming it's going to be a mixture of old and new faces, has a dynamic that's just as interesting as the first group, but also very different. So far, the only Phase 4 movie we know that's really set in stone, like with the title and everything, is Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, okay, I've already touched on what I'd like to see in that film in the past, so instead, let's talk about a few of the big rumored movies. Doctor Strange 2 and the possible Black Widow film. We've seen both these characters before, in multiple movies obviously, so there just won't be the freshness and novelty of introducing an entirely new cast, like with the Guardians back in 2014, or even with Doctor Strange's first movie. And that's not the only problem. In my opinion, while they can occasionally be really interesting characters, neither Strange or Natasha are as exciting characters or performances as, say, Spider-Man or Downey's Iron Man. And while I didn't hate Doctor Strange's first movie, it was just kind of okay and pretty middle of the road to me as far as MCU movies go. But this doesn't mean I think both of these movies are doomed to failure or anything. I just think they need to take a new approach. To be more specific, the Thor Ragnarok approach. Now, okay, I'm afraid when I say that, a lot of you are going to interpret it to mean they should be really weird comedies, like Ragnarok was, but that's not really what I'm referring to at all. What really set that movie apart was a directorial vision that made it feel more like the work of a really creative individual and less like a competent factory product. And I'd argue that many of the best MCU movies have this in common. I'd like to see that taken even farther in Phase 4, with directors being encouraged to really put their own spin on these characters, and maybe even experimenting a bit more with the usual Marvel structure. After a certain point, the big third act battles start to feel a little repetitive, and I'd like to see Kevin Feige and company show that they're okay with shaking things up a little bit and creating something that feels truly unique from what's come before.
He will not interfere with my plans. Nothing can stop the Red Skull.
Then there's the team. This part's a little harder to talk about, since it's obviously not known who's going to be in the Avengers when the dust settles after the fourth film. But one thing is for sure, the new team will need a new dynamic. The first Avengers movie, for whatever its flaws, was extremely good at nailing down the group's relationship with each other. Cap and Tony not exactly hitting it off provided some great conflict. And Bruce and Tony's friendship made a lot of sense, and went on to be a big part of both their characters. Joss Whedon, recent examples aside, has always been really great at writing ensemble casts, and especially at writing intergroup conflict in a way that feels really real and human. Whatever form these new Avengers take, I hope they really tap into that. Superheroes are, almost by definition, big personalities, and seeing them play off each other should be a lot of fun, even if no one throws a single punch. All three Avengers movies did that really well, and I think that needs to be retained, even if the specifics are pretty different. What will Captain Marvel make of Doctor Strange? Will Peter Parker need to take on a more adult role and have to grow up fast if his mentor maybe isn't around anymore? And what does Wakanda think of the Avengers after a fairly brutal battle was waged on their land? There's a lot of interesting questions that Phase 4 could dig into, and I think that's honestly just the beginning. Then there's the question of the Guardians, and this is kind of a tough one, honestly. There's a lot of opinions you can have about the firing of writer and director James Gunn. Honestly, I'm not that interested in opening that particular can of worms here, but one thing that definitely can't be disputed is that it leaves the Guardians franchise in a pretty big mess. The Guardians films have always felt like the vision of one director, and when you're missing that, and you add angry actors and how far into production the third film already was, it adds up to one big headache. Do they film the script Gunn left them, or go in a totally different direction? I can kind of see both sides of the argument here, because while I'd love to see the end of Gunn's trilogy, it just won't be the same without him actually there to direct it. If not done very carefully, it could feel like Community Season 4, a shambling, zombified version of the thing you liked, without the actual guy in charge running things. But if they do go a new route, I think the franchise needs to be radically different going forward, because I just don't have that much interest in watching some other director try to be James Gunn light.
And now surrender.
For a moment, Captain America is stopped. Then, suddenly...
Overall though, I'm very interested to see where Phase 4 goes. Marvel Phase 3 has been very strong, and even though there's been movies I thought were less than exciting, the stuff I did like were some of my absolute favorite superhero films. So as someone who runs a YouTube channel that covers superheroes a lot, I get sent a ton of great art. Most of them are really awesome poses, but I've noticed that drawing motion is a little more difficult, which is why I'm really happy to recommend Characters in Motion, Capturing Motion in Illustration on Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 20,000 classes. In this one, Patrick Brown breaks down exactly how to create exciting and believable motion in comics, which of course has always been a cornerstone of Marvel Comics since the Jack Kirby days. If you're interested in that or any of the other thousands of classes they have available in design, writing, tech, and more, you can get that with a premium membership. Join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for you guys. Get 2 months of Skillshare absolutely free. To sign up, visit the link in the description and get 2 months of unlimited access to over 20,000 classes for free. So if you feel like learning something new, be sure to click on that link.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.